Hello there, my name is Maynard and welcome back to Gorilla Picking. Now, what we are going to do today is the second of two videos on this Cadman lock that we picked in the last episode. So, what you saw me do in the last episode was open this thing here. First time it's been done as far as I know. What we need to do now is talk a lot more about the lock itself, why I think it is so good. And believe me, I do, okay? I think it's a brilliant lock. We're going to talk about why I wouldn't buy it. We're also going to talk about the company that manufactures it, and as well as all that, we're also going to talk about the locking systems in it and how you pick the thing. So we've got an awful lot to get through here, folks. Probably a good 20-25 minutes worth of data to convey to you guys. So the very first thing we're going to do is talk about Cadman itself. Now, Cadman is a brand, so Cadman is not the manufacturer. The manufacturer is a firm called the Shenzhen Smet Hardware and Plastic Company, and I'm going to show you a whole lot of websites later, so don't panic guys, there'll be links down below in the description as well. Cadman is a brand that the Shenzhen Smet Hardware and Plastic Company sell their locks under. They are aiming fair and square at, as you can see by the writing on that packaging, the Israeli market. So this lock here is aimed absolutely at the sort of people who would buy a multi-lock and stick it on their front door in Israel. That goes further than the packaging. You'll see here on the key card it says Cadman High Security Israel up in the top corner, and a whole lot of other bits and pieces as well that that identify this as going to Israel. It is also sold in other parts of the world as well. We will have a look at the Cadman website shortly. The Cadman website itself is based in Hong Kong, so the address there is cadman.com.hk. They very clearly sell lock hardware into the Hong Kong market under that same brand name. Alright, so having talked about that, you will see when we look at the other websites that not only have they taken aim fair and square at multi-lock, but they have taken aim in fact at Lockwood by name. So you'll see that this very clearly is the same form factor as the Lockwood 570, which we know and love down in this part of the world. They are in fact aiming at ASA alloy, so they are aiming at ASA overall and some of their regional brands in particular. So we'll look at that in a second or two. Now I want to talk for a minute about the reason I would not buy this lock, and I'm going to spend 20 minutes telling you how fantastic this thing is, alright? But before we do that, I really want to get out of the way the reason why I personally wouldn't put that thing on my front door. Now, as I am sure you blokes know, I am a massive advocate for letting the professionals deal with the professional stuff. I am a massive advocate for handymen and lockpickers in general keeping their noses out of the business of security and leaving it to the locksmiths who know what they're doing. Now, honest to God, there is nobody in New Zealand but me who has one of these. Australia, there's no professional importer, although there's Gary, who we'll talk about in a minute. But there's nobody in the locksmithing industry that imports these things. Now, unless or until, and I do think it's until, somebody in the profession takes on these locks and starts supporting them in your country, I would not buy them. There are a number of reasons for that, okay guys? So, first and foremost, these locks come with 5 keys, and they come with a key card so that you've got a code there so that you can get extra keys cut. Now unfortunately in New Zealand and Australia there is just nobody who can cut these keys for you. Nobody has the machine, nobody has the blanks, nobody has the know-how to do it. If you want some more keys for this, you're going to have to go to China for it. So that for a start is a little bit silly. I won't be buying one of these until somebody in my city can support one of these things. The second thing about it, and this is a slightly more immediate issue, I guess. I'm just going to zoom in for a second here. I want you to have a look at the tailpiece. Now this is a standard Lockwood, and this is my tricky little Cadman. Now different tailpiece, guys, okay, and what's more, and what worries me far more actually, different mounting. So the standard Lockwood has two screws at 180 degrees here to mount the tailpiece. There are literally dozens of different tailpieces that you can get for these things, and my locksmith at the end of my road has all those tailpieces. Now on the other hand, this Cadman comes standard with this tailpiece and this tailpiece only. So for a start, it's only going to fit a subset of the locks that are out there already in use, the installed base. And secondly, these screws are at 45 because when you see the keyway, of course, you'll see that the keyway on this thing is horizontal. So we can't get the screws at 180 because we'd run into the keyway. So the tailpieces for this thing are not interchangeable with the tail pieces for this one, and so until this is well supported in my country and we can get keys cut and tail pieces and rekeying ability and maintenance ability, I would not be buying one of these. Alright, so going to take a quick break and then start talking about all the good things about this lock and why I love it. Back in a second. Okay guys, well we're back. Now I have cleared all the packaging away and we are now dealing with the lock itself. Now what I have done here, I have taken the pin-in-pin elements out. So the pin-in-pin elements are sitting up here. What we have got in the lock at the moment is two things in fact. We have got the magnetic element, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, and we have got a spring and ball detent, which we're going to talk about in some detail as well. So let's have a look at the lock itself. You look at this thing and it looks like a bog standard Lockwood 570 cylinder, and dimensions are absolutely identical. Fit and finish on this thing is, if I may be blunt, as good if not better than the equivalent Lockwood. There are 5 chambers at the top. There is some anti-drill protection in the front of the lock body here. We've got the mounting screw hole at the back as it should be, and a little hole at the bottom here which, you know, at first sight you don't really know what it's for. It might be a drain hole or something, who knows. And then the big horizontal keyway that gives away the fact that it's a dimple lock. Now when we put the key in and operate this lock, it snicks back into place. You watch this. Hear that little click and see it snick back in? Let's do that a little closer. Let's wind it round just gently. Snick. See that? Now the reason it does that is that there is a little ball, spring-loaded ball detent in the front of this cylinder. Now they didn't have to do that, guys. There is absolutely no locking function to that, so this standard Lockwood lock here works very nicely, thank you very much, without a little ball detent that snicks the cylinder back into place. So why did they do that? Why did the manufacturers of this thing spend money on some extra processes and some extra parts? Well, they did it to make you guys feel good. And I want you to think that through, okay? They wanted this lock to feel good in use. This is the equivalent of your Mercedes-Benz car door going clunk when you close it. And it is the equivalent of you buying a good quality keyboard with tactile feedback for your computer so that you get that nice feel when you push the keys. That little ball there is there simply so that you feel good when you use this lock. Now that is an absolute dead giveaway, unequivocal sign of quality. Somebody at the design team of this thing is thinking about the end user, and I've got a lot of respect for that, okay? Now, let's think a little bit deeper inside the lock. Let's think about this thing that looks a bit like a drain hole. So you look at it, and it's a hole, and there's a little bit of metal in there, but you know, you try and turn the core, and not much happens, and you think, huh, okay, there must be a reason for that. So when you're looking at this lock for a start, you might poke this thing with your pick, and then lo and behold, it turns again. So you start to realise that this little thing here might have something to do with the functioning of the lock, and then you look at the key and you see that there's a couple of interesting things here. So this is a pretty standard copy, very good quality copy, of a multi-lock interactive. We have got the interactive element here in position 2, and if I just poke that with my pick, you'll see that going up and down a bit. But further on down the key, you'll see a little metallic thing let into the surface. So there's one on this side, and of course there's a corresponding one on the bottom there. Now I'm giving nothing away here, folks, because you already know that that's a magnet. And what that magnet does is something very, very clever. It is an anti-pick and an anti-bump measure. And what it does, whilst all the other pins are being pushed upwards away from the key on the top of the lock here, what the magnet on the bottom, on the underside, has to do is suck this little element up towards the key. So it's doing something that keys normally can't do. And if I hold that up to the camera and I insert the key, you'll see that when the thing gets into place, we just get a little tiny movement from that thing. Let's just push that key in. Click, there we go, you see it go. And now we're free to rotate. Now, thankfully for picking, this thing has no bitting to it. So it is a binary element, like a key control element. It's 0 or it's 1. It's on or it's off. It's picked or it's not. And that, in fact, is the saving grace of being able to pick this thing. Because if there was bitting on this thing and we had to treat it like an active pin, it would be diabolically difficult, and you'll see why in a minute when I open this thing up. So we've had a look at the outside of the lock. We've seen everything that we can see. We know that we have got an odd little tail piece. That's the last you're going to see of that. So the next thing we're going to do is take that tail piece off, and you'll see that what we've got inside there, first of all, is a little element to stop the tip of the key. So multi-lock keys are what's called tip stopped, which means that whereas a normal key, where's Tiffany's key? Hang on, okay. Whereas a normal key is pushed in and is stopped on this shoulder here, most dimple keys, and certainly all multi-lock keys, don't have that, okay? They are stopped by the tip of the key hitting something. So what we've actually got in here is a little brass element, a little round brass element there, that stops the key going in too far. Now we are gonna dump that, because now that we've spoken about it, we really don't need to see it any further, and we are going to take the core out of this thing. Now the first thing that you're going to see as I take the core out is the little spring detent that I was talking about. So there is, I'm just going to push that element in, and just right at the front of the lock here you will see a tiny little ball bearing, and underneath that is a tiny little spring. That is, there we go, have a look at that, guys. That's the thing they didn't need to put in there, guys, okay? There was absolutely no need from a locking perspective to have those two elements there to do the drilling in the core there, and the corresponding drilling in the body of the lock. They did that to make you feel good. Okay, now here is our magnetic element, and we can see it a little bit better now. So again, I am going to zoom in, and we'll just have a look at this thing in action. It's pretty obvious how it works. The magnet, of course, just sucks the thing in. So watch it, and as the key gets to the right spot, click, there we go, pulls it in towards the core and lets the thing turn, because it's no longer poking out and down into the body of the lock here. Now there is of course a spring underneath that, so the spring is forcing it out, and again I'm going to dump both of those elements because we have now spoken about them in as much detail as we need. And the next thing we can go on and talk about is the construction of this core itself. Now the core is complex, but not so complex that we're not going to understand it if we have a bit of a think. So let's have a look in there, and you'll see that we have 5 chambers. You will see that we have, and again I'm just going to zoom in a bit here so you can see a little bit better. You will see that we have a funny little thing, a little spring-loaded thing in chamber 2 here down the bottom. Alright, that's for the interactive element on the key. I'll show you how that works in a minute. And then here between chambers 5 and 4, you can see the hole that the magnet sits in down frame U. Here we go. You can see the hole that the magnetic element sits in. Now you'd think that it'd actually be fairly easy to get to, okay? But then you have a look inside the lock, and you see, horror of all horrors, that there is a whole lot of bitting right here. Okay, so that corresponds to these grooves you can see on the key. Surprise, surprise. And if we look at the thing from front on, you look at that and you think it looks wide open, you know. But in actual fact, in order to pick that little magnetic element, what we've got to do is somehow get past, remember we've got all these 5 chambers loaded up with pins, we've somehow got to get past that. We would love to be going down this big wide open side of the lock, so this is the open side here that we'd love to shove our pick down the side of, but because it hits that warding, when we get down to the level of pin 4, we can't actually get our pick across to interact with the magnet. So what I had to do to pick this, here is my magnetic pick. What we had to do was slip the pick down the tight side, so down the side of the keyway that has very little room here. I had to slip it down there past all these pins. So you saw me lifting these pins with a thin pick. It gets to about there and then stops, so it's hanging up on some warding on the other side actually. We need to move that across a little and get the magnet lined up with a hole, and at that point we've got this magnetic element sucked up out of the way and picked. It really is a very, very, very fiddly process, and the chaps who designed this, they knew that. Alright, they knew that they were leaving very, very little real estate down here for us to use. Okay, next thing to talk about is the interactive element, and I'm going to load a couple of pins in there and we'll deal with that. Right, so the interactive element. Now let's have a think about the key pins for pin 2. They are outer and inner right here, and you'll see that these little puppies are very, very short. So let's load that into the chamber, and what we're going to do now, we are going to push that up with a pick, just a standard pick. Okay, so that's my Sparrow's Tron. We push that up with the blade of the Tron, and what you see there is a little bit worrying, guys. What you see there is that those pins are actually not able to be pushed up to the shear line. So in order to set pin 2, what you actually have to do is push those pins higher than an ordinary key is able to push them. Now that sounds like double Dutch, doesn't it? That sounds pretty weird. But that's what the interactive element is all about. Now you will recall that there is a little bump, a little spring-loaded bump on the bottom of the core here that corresponds with pin 2. See it there? You will also recall that there is an interactive element on the key. Now what actually happens is that that little bump on the bottom of the lock pushes that pin upwards, so you can see that going up like that, and there is this little spike here that pushes those pins up above the level of the top of the key. That's what an interactive element's all about. So the idea is that if you haven't got a key with an interactive element, or if you have a key with the wrong interactive element, you won't be able to push that thing high enough up. Now in actual fact it's a little bit more tricky than that in this lock as well, because as well as doing that job that we've just spoken about, pushing pin 2 up to the point where it'll now actually set, what it also means is that we've got yet another thing. We've got that spring-loaded thing in the bottom of the chamber here, which gives us a lot less real estate to maneuver our magnetic pick in. So it does double duty. It sets this pin and it makes it harder to get down to that magnetic one down the back. Alright, what else do we know about this? Well, there's actually not much else to tell you about the core. Really good manufacturing tolerances, okay? So again, this is beautifully made. Anti-drill protection at the front here where you'd expect it to be, and some nice pins. And in fact, gents, it is the pins that we are going to talk about next. Now for that I actually need to show you a macro photo. I need to show you a big blown up photo. So I'm going to cut away from what I'm doing here and put a big picture on the screen. And what we are going to do is talk about the way that these little beasts work. Now you will see there 3 pins on your screen. So at the left hand side you can see the driver. There is the outer segment and the inner segment. Then there is a little wee skinny pin in the middle there, that's the inner key pin, and then you'll see on the right hand side a big fat outer key pin as well. Now would you look at the manufacturing on that, guys? Would you look at the precision on that? And for God's sake, would you look at the serrations? That's actually what makes this lock fairly difficult to pick, and this is unusual. This is different to how a standard multi-lock works. Now don't worry too much about that big fat key pin, okay? That's pretty standard. I don't have a lot to say about that. Now that little inner key pin in the middle of your picture there, you will see that on the head of that, on the left hand side, there is a serration in there, and that is very unusual. Ordinary multi-locks don't have that. Now that is why setting the inners on this thing was such a nightmare, and why we had so many multiple clicks. You'll remember about 3/4 of the way through the pick, I thought I had maybe only a couple of inners to set, and in actual fact it turned out I had maybe half a dozen more clicks on those inners to go. Now the other thing that you'll see there on the driver, that little cutout on the inner driver is pretty standard. Okay, so that is designed to catch on the inside of the outer key pin, but would you look at those nasty tiny little serrations on the outer pin itself? those little serrations, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or maybe 6 of those things, feel absolutely and completely different to the multi-lock ones. The multi-lock ones are a lot deeper and a lot, what's the best way to put it? They give you a lot better feedback. These little ones here are just very, very shallow, and believe me when I tell you, they make picking this thing extra difficult. However, you saw that it's doable, guys. I went through, I got those picked, and then we picked those inners with those nasty little serrations, and away we went. Alright, so having talked at really quite great length about the lock itself now and why I think it's so good, what I want to do now is show you some websites and show you why I think this particular company, the Shenzhen Smet Hardware company, is doing such a fantastic job, and why I think they will be a threat to major companies like ASA. Back in a second. Okay folks, well we're just about there with this review really. I just want to show you a few websites that you're going to want to have a look at. First of all, this is Shenzhen Smet's kind of overall shop site on Alibaba.com. They make a whole bunch of hardware type stuff. As you can see, they make yo-yos, for what reason I don't know. Door hinges, nuts, bolts, all that sort of stuff. But will you have a quick look here at the lock offerings that they've got? So we have got double-ended Euros with thumb turns, mortar cylinders, key and knobs, more mortar cylinders, and this one here, which is the one that we've been looking at just recently, the competitive price, excuse me, here we go, Lockwood cases. Now, if you look closely here, actually, you will see that this one that they've got on the site here, the one that we're looking at the moment, is actually the next model up. So this is the SMET003 bar 2. So the one that I've just picked is the bar 1. And you're really not going to believe this, guys, but let's just go to that picture there. If you look closely, folks, you will see that this is in fact a copy of an MT5 Plus. They are selling a sidebar lock, believe it or not, as well. So this one is 5 pins and a 4 slider sidebar. They have a little animation here, which I won't go through and look at, but so they're selling some incredibly good quality locks, and will you look at the price? This is the bit that freaks me out. They are going to cost you at most $5 US for one lock plus 5 keys packaged with a minimum order of 100 pieces. So this is their wholesale site, clearly. Now, it's no use to me, alright? I'm not a lock wholesaler, but I'll tell you for an absolute fact, there is somebody in the locksmithing industry at the wholesale level who is going to jump on this stuff. He is going to wholesale it to his country's locksmiths, and he's going to get this stuff supported, and he's going to make a killing, whoever this guy is. It's just these guys are a manufacturer on their way up. There ain't no doubt about it. Here is another one of their sites. This is the China.cn site, so it's basically like Alibaba, same kind of thing. This is a double-ended Euro. Again, you can see a couple of important things here. First of all, have a look at that key there. Obviously this is a lock with a sidebar to it. Also have a look at that cogwheel. There is only one country in the world that uses cogwheels like that, folks. That is Israel. This lock is aimed fair and square at the Israeli market. Again, the cost on these is just absolutely mind-boggling. Let's go back. Between US $5 and $10 a piece. You got to order 100 pieces. Again, no use to me, but there is going to be some wholesaler somewhere who is going to love these things. Here's the cadman.com.hk site. So this is the Chinese language one. Again, they're showing us their what is clearly their flagship, the lock with the MT5 clone. And finally, guys have been asking me where I got the lock that I picked. I got them from Gary Keesing. Now, Gary is very well known to lockpickers in Australia and New Zealand. He's a very good lockpicker, and he also, with his own money actually, buys wholesale quantities of locks and sells them on eBay for two reasons. Number one, he sells them at a very small profit. He doesn't make much money on each lock, so he's basically trying to self-fund his hobby, okay? Self-fund his hobby. But number two, Gary is quite passionate, quite keen really, on getting these higher security, unusual locks out there into the hobbyist community, and that is why he is running this site. So there you go, folks. That is my thoughts on the Cadman crowd and the people who own them. This Shenzhen Smet company. I think they are an awesome bunch. I really do think that these people are going somewhere. I think this is a fantastic lock. I think once it is supported in its destination countries, then these locks are going to clean up. Thanks for watching, guys. I'd love to know what you think about this. Please leave some comments down below. I know this was a long one, but I think it was an important one. Comments below. My name's Michael Maynard. This is Gorilla Picking, and that's the Cadman. Thanks, guys.